There were, in the forgotten folds of the Andrometical cluster, a group of very serious, very wrinkled, and terribly self-important beings known as the Elders of Varnock Prime. Their heads were so large they had their own weather patterns. Their robes were so long they needed interns to carry the ends, and their opinions, their opinions, were considered more sacred than the orbital path of a holy moon goose. They ruled not with iron fists, because iron irritated their skin, but with regulations that spanned galaxies, tangled bureaucracies, and caused at least 7 documented cases of spontaneous paperwork combustion. But one rule, one shimmering, utterly unquestionable rule, stood above them all. Never let a human finish a sentence. Not, please, not unless it's Tuesday, just don't. And every time someone asked why, an elder would shiver violently, glance toward the ceiling as if fearing it might sprout tentacles, and sing and say, because the last time we did, the laws of physics filed for early retirement. Naturally, the record of that incident had been locked away in a vault so secure it required 2 keys, 1 musical note, and a goat named Philip to open. Philip had since retired, leaving the secret well and truly safe. Most species accepted this rule without question. Some even applauded it. The Bolnar Confederacy issued stamps honoring it. The Brumpteks of Sector 9 renamed their calendar in its honor, even though it meant every month now started with a loud sneeze. Still, somewhere out there, a question lingered like the smell of microwaved fish in a break room. What the hell was it about humans and unfinished sentences? Enter Varnock Prime's Supreme Council Chamber, a monument to dignity built entirely out of gravitas and marble-grade smugness. A long table, 37 chairs, 3 floating orbs whose job was never clarified, and a mural depicting the elders heroically ignoring things. At the center sat Grand Elder Blithox, who'd once stared down a black hole until it blinked. He adjusted his ceremonial cowl, which also served as a small garden for rare mosses, and leaned toward the group. "The humans," he said slowly, as if the word itself might sprout legs and run off with their dignity, "are requesting another diplomatic audience." A collective groan rose like an existential fart. Elder Nunquill clicked his beak. "The last one built a zoo out of concepts. They weaponized rhymes," added Elder Grox, whose left arm had turned into a limerick for 3 weeks. "They asked for coffee," Blithox murmured darkly, "and we gave it to them. Now half our suns blink twice before rising." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that usually precedes bad decisions, forgotten prophecies, or jazz saxophone solos. Then Elder Zuntal, who always wore socks on his antennae for reasons no one dared question, stood up and asked what no one dared say out loud. "Do we let them speak?" The room erupted. "Are you mad? Do you want another reality fold? My toenails still hum Beethoven." Blithox raised his many-fingered hand, which had once negotiated a peace treaty by simply being too tired to argue. "We uphold the rule. We do not let the humans finish a sentence. Ever. Under any—" A small blinking light interrupted him. A transmission from a human ship, just 2 words. "Hey there." Everyone ducked. Not because it was dangerous, though it might be, but because instinct, tradition, and a deep cultural fear of human conversational momentum told them to. And somewhere, far, far away, a man named Kevin Tramble was clearing his throat, completely unaware that the fate of several hundred star systems now hinged on his casual banter. The records of the first human-elder interaction were buried so deep in the bureaucratic labyrinth of Varnock Prime that even mentioning them out loud could trigger an audit. The elders didn't talk about it. They winced, hissed, or in one case, deflated slightly. But the files still existed in a vault labeled "Open only if existence is already doomed or you're bored." Inside that vault, sealed within an envelope made of paranoid paper, was a report so disturbing that it was written entirely in passive voice to avoid assigning blame. It began like this: Subject: Human contact initiated. Result, catastrophic. Follow-up, never again, for the love of all that is wibbly. The subject of this legendary catastrophe was a woman named Dr. Pamela Jortsbane, a cultural attaché from Earth, known for her enthusiasm, loud scarves, and tendency to start sentences with, "Now don't freak out," but she was chosen for first contact after a randomizer algorithm crashed and defaulted to J, and everyone assumed that meant Jane Goodall. It did not. Pamela's ship, the Polite Inquiry, arrived in orbit around Varnock Prime on a Thursday, a day the elders considered deeply unlucky, mostly because Thursdays had too many consonants. The moment her transmission opened, the galactic linguistic stabilizer began making choking sounds. A technician tried to translate her first words and suffered a spontaneous philosophical crisis. "Hi there," Pamela had beamed. "I brought banana bread." The elders, startled, responded with a tightly scripted welcome sequence designed to be both respectful and completely unengaging. But Pamela, unaware of the ancient protocol titled "Let no human speak beyond word 3, pushed ahead like a cheerful rhinoceros at a book club. "I just wanted to say—" The room tilted. An elder sneezed in reverse. The sound system emitted what would later be categorized as a shriek in a major key. Pamela blinked. "That it's an honor to—" A vase turned into a question. The concept of triangles briefly stopped working. And Blithox, leader of the council and proud owner of a 900-year-old scowl, screamed into the intercom, "Someone mute her!" But it was too late. To represent Earth in this historic— Boom! Reality hiccuped. A moon developed stage fright and retreated behind a gas giant. Gravity reversed just for hats, and most memorably, a herd of invisible goats began reciting limericks that offended 4 religions and 1 specific color. The council terminated the communication by launching their emergency banana bread incinerator. Pamela, unfazed, sent a follow-up message titled, "Oops, my bad." This triggered the drafting of Regulation 6701Z. No human shall be allowed to complete a sentence in the presence, vicinity, or even holographic approximation of an elder, punishable by extremely severe tisking. Since then, any mention of human communication induced the elders to break into spontaneous coughing fits, or pretend they were suddenly very interested in floor tiles. Still, not everyone agreed with the policy. There were whispers, strange ones, that perhaps the humans weren't breaking reality. Maybe they were, editing it, improvising new versions, slapping stickers on the cosmos and calling it modern art. But those who whispered that kind of thing often found themselves reassigned to asteroid cataloging, which was mostly just naming rocks like Gary. And so the rule stood. Because when Pamela Jortsbane finished that sentence, the known universe briefly turned into an interpretive dance, and no one wanted to risk that happening again. Kevin Tramble had no business being in space. He wasn't a pilot, scientist, diplomat, or even particularly alert. His greatest achievement on Earth was once correctly installing a printer driver without screaming. And yet, there he was, sitting in the communications chair of the diplomatic vessel Serendipity Duck, chewing on what he hoped was gum, but might have been insulation. How he ended up in this position involved 3 clerical errors, 1 broken vending machine, and a very confused intern named Clag. Officially, Kevin was listed as cultural consultant. Unofficially, he was that guy who wandered onto the wrong shuttle during lunch. But no one noticed, because Kevin had one of those faces, inoffensive, slightly squinting, permanently mid-thought. And he spoke in a way that made people think he was quoting someone smarter, even though he wasn't. He also had the unnerving habit of starting a sentence with deep philosophical weight and ending it with something about socks. Take, for example, the time he was asked by the AI interface to state his mission objective. He'd said, "Well, I suppose existence itself is a sort of mission, if you think about—" And the lights flickered. A chair melted. Somewhere deep in the navigation subroutines, the ship decided it would no longer obey clocks. Kevin had what experts call accidental narrative gravity. The more he talked, the more improbable things became. He didn't bend the rules of reality. He leaned on them, like a man trying to steady himself on a coat rack that turns out to be a bear. When the elders learned Kevin was en route to Varnock Prime, due to a spreadsheet misalignment in the intergalactic guest list, they panicked with the precise grace of a fire drill in a fireworks factory. Blathox ordered a Level 9 conversational containment protocol. Elder Nunquill began stuffing cotton in his ears. Elder Grox tried to file an injunction against Vowels. The entire planetary defense grid was redirected toward Kevin's microphone, but Kevin wasn't trying to be dangerous. He just wanted to ask directions. He'd been trying to find the coffee machine, which was why when he opened the channel and said, "So, I was wondering if anyone here might possibly know..." A dozen elders simultaneously dove for the comms panel, hitting every button at once. The system rebooted in Mandarin. A backup AI began singing sea shanties. The galaxy paused briefly, concerned. Kevin waited, silence. He looked at the screen. "Right. Bit shy then. That's fine." He began to hum. The hum destabilized 3 probability fields and caused a nearby asteroid to turn inside out. Somewhere, a pigeon with no business being in space cooed ominously. Still, Kevin pressed on. "You know, I've always thought diplomacy was just advanced small talk, and small talk's really just large talk that got scared. Anyway..." The word "anyway" triggered a pre-programmed emergency failsafe. The ship ejected its cafeteria, which promptly formed a cult and drifted off, chanting about soup. Back on Varnock Prime, panic mounted. "We have to stop him," shouted Elder Zuntal, who was now wearing earmuffs and a haunted expression. Blithox, pale and twitching, looked into the distance. "He's not even trying to finish a sentence now. That makes it worse. He's building momentum." "No, what if he's the one?" Grox whispered. "The one who doesn't need to finish a sentence to complete a thought?" The others gasped. A being who could weaponize incomplete syntax. Unthinkable. Unfortunate. Unstoppable. Kevin, meanwhile, had found the coffee machine. It made something brown and aggressive. He took a sip, grimaced and muttered, "Tastes like ambition." And suddenly, 46 minor constellations developed anxiety. By the time Kevin's diplomatic pod touched down on Varnock Prime, the planet had already declared a level Snafu 12 emergency. A code so serious it required ceremonial robes, backup ceremonial robes, and a goat that had to be mildly insulted before proceedings could begin. The arrival zone was cleared of all personnel, ideas, and anything that could be interpreted as flammable under existential stress. Kevin emerged from the pod holding a thermal mug and wearing an expression of polite confusion, like someone who had just walked into a book club and realized it was actually an exorcism. He looked around. "Oh," he said, "no welcome banner? Bit formal then." His voice echoed through the halls of the Grand Spire of Dialogue, a building specifically designed to suppress conversational risks. It was built of language-absorbent stone and had ceilings so high they qualified as weather. The elders watched from the observation deck, faces strained, ears braced, several of them wearing protective irony filters. "He's going to say something," whispered Elder Zuntal. "No, no," muttered Grox. "Look, he's chewing. That buys us time." Indeed, Kevin had located a snack dispenser, which he mistook for a diplomatic offering. He chewed, loudly. The sound was analyzed by 3 translation AIs, one of which promptly exploded in self-defense. Kevin strolled into the main chamber of carefully vague interactions. He waved at a hovering protocol drone, which panicked, crashed into a decorative peace obelisk, and shattered into 1,000 guilty components. "Oh dear," Kevin muttered. "Was that important?" From the ceiling a voice boomed, "Please remain silent for the duration of this interaction." Kevin looked up, nodded. "Right. Got it. Mum's the word. Though technically she always preferred..." Elder Blithox slapped the mute switch. The screen went dark. A flower arrangement wilted. "Why won't he just stop?" wailed Nunquil. "Because he's a human," Blithox snapped. "And they don't stop. They meander. They wander. They spiral into anecdotes about public transportation until time gives up." Meanwhile, Kevin, still unaware of the planetary-scale dread he was causing, sat down on a circular bench that activated the ritual platform of significant speeches. It began to rise. Lights dimmed. Trumpets prepared themselves for gravitas. "Oh, crikey," Kevin muttered. "Am I being promoted?" At that moment, the council enacted the final failsafe, the interruption swarm. Tiny drones, trained in the art of interjection, burst into the chamber. Their mission: prevent Kevin from completing even the suggestion of a coherent thought. One buzzed near his ear and shouted, "Interesting weather we're having!" Another recited sports statistics from an imaginary league. A third simply emitted a polite every time Kevin inhaled. Kevin, nonplussed, nodded politely and said, "Right, yes, fascinating. Now, I was actually thinking that if we all just—" A drone exploded from sheer effort. Blithox watched, despair rising like a bad soufflé. "He's adapting. He's surfing the interruptions." "Impossible," gasped Grox. "No one can maintain a thought stream under swarm pressure." But Kevin could. Because Kevin, like most humans, had spent years surviving corporate meetings, public transport, and relatives who forwarded conspiracy emails. His brain was a fortress of fragmented attention. As he stood on the platform, blinking at the drones, sipping from his mug, and humming the theme to a soap opera no one else remembered, the council realized something dreadful. They couldn't stop him. They could only hope he'd get bored. But Kevin didn't get bored. He got curious. "You know," he said, "this reminds me of a time in Stoke-on-Trent when I accidentally joined a mime troupe." Reality quivered. A tree recited poetry. A floor tile became sentient and immediately demanded a union. Somewhere, the laws of thermodynamics agreed to take a sabbatical, and Kevin, completely unaware, kept going. If there was one being in the galaxy less amused by Kevin Tramble than the Elders, it was Ambassador Tizulia of the Manathi conglomerate, a race known for their translucent skin, unblinking stares, and total lack of metaphor tolerance. Tizulia was famous for brokering peace between planets that didn't even know they were at war. She could stare down a black market empathy dealer and make them cry in alphabetical order. Her motto was clear: control the dialogue, or it controls you. So when the council begged to deal with Kevin, she agreed with the emotional range of a malfunctioning kettle. She walked into the grand chamber wearing ceremonial neutrality and the facial expression of someone who had just smelled burnt toast forever. Kevin saw her and smiled. "Oh, hello? Are you the coffee person? Because this stuff tastes like a pensioner's regret." Tizulia blinked once, slowly. "I am here to negotiate the terms of your continued vocal output." Kevin squinted. "Is that a polite way of saying, 'shut up'?" "Yes." "Well," he said, sipping again, "good luck with that." And thus began the war of words, a conversation so volatile that several nearby planets legally declared language unsafe for minors. Tizulia started with precision. "Your species destabilizes structural reality through incomplete statements." Kevin nodded. "Yeah, we do that with IKEA furniture too. Your humor contains recursive unpredictability. It disorients chronology. I once made a clock laugh so hard it stopped ticking. You see, that right there. Where, oh, that's just my elbow. It does that when I lie down too quickly." Tizulia paused. Her eye twitched. She recalibrated. "Every syllable you emit is a structural hazard." Kevin leaned forward, grinning. "Then imagine what happens when I sing." A panel behind her sparked. A nearby elder fainted. Somewhere, the abstract concept of sincerity exploded into a flock of flamingos. "Mr. Tramble, please. I'm attempting to prevent a metaphysical breach." "Right. Which is why I think we need to talk about trousers." "No, what? Trousers?" "It's the way they bunch at the ankle. No one's addressing it." A silence so loud it rang like a bell descended over the chamber. Tzulia turned to the elders. He's not just unpredictable, he's deliberately non-linear. Grox sobbed quietly. He said trousers. And now I'm thinking about destiny. Why? Blithox whispered. Because it's happening again. The last time it happened, as records poorly detailed, the council had to repaint the moon in colors that didn't exist yet. Kevin, sensing the tension, tried to ease it. Okay, let's take a breath. You ever notice how aliens always speak in riddles, but humans just wing it with bad puns and snack references? Tzulia blinked again. Your species is a verbal supernova. Thanks, we try. So should we hug this out or invent a new calendar? The council had no answer. Their systems were blinking, lights stuttered, gravity wobbled like a drunk philosopher. And then Kevin said something no one expected. Look, I know I cause weird stuff. It happens. But maybe the weirdness isn't a bug, it's a feature. For a moment, just one, Tzulia hesitated. A flicker of, what was it? Agreement, intrigue, acid reflux. Whatever it was, the chamber hummed. And Kevin, ever the accidental conductor of the absurd, shrugged and said, anyway. At that exact moment, the floor cracked open, the ceiling sighed, and a column of light shot through the room. From it emerged a dancing octopus in a tuxedo, followed by a Greek chorus made entirely of spoons. Kevin blinked. Oh, that's new. Tzulia stared. Did you mean to do that? Not entirely, but I was thinking about dinner theatre. Oh, following the incident of the theatrical octopus and the spoon chorus, now classified as a Class 9 spontaneous performance event, the Council of Elders held an emergency session lasting 14 hours and one argument about sandwiches. The decision, though made reluctantly and with the emotional tone of someone choosing between being kicked or bitten, was unanimous. Kevin Tramble would be detained, not imprisoned exactly. That sounded rude. Instead, he would be strategically relocated to the chamber of neutral vibration, a place so dull, so impossibly unremarkable, that thoughts themselves took naps. The room had no corners, no colors, no echoes. The walls emitted a faint hum in B-flat, just off-key enough to discourage melody. It was designed to suppress inspiration, crush metaphors, and evaporate punchlines before they reached the lips. It had successfully muted an entire stand-up comedy troupe from Rigel 5, a species that communicated exclusively in sarcasm. Kevin was escorted there by 2 emotionless drones and a mildly apologetic pamphlet. Inside, he sat on the only available surface, a chair scientifically engineered to be neither comfortable nor uncomfortable. He crossed his legs, looked around and said, looks like an accountant's dream. The room flickered, momentarily offended. Right, Kevin added. No jokes. No thinking. Just be. He nodded as if agreeing with an internal voice, then pulled a napkin from his pocket and began folding it. Within minutes, he had crafted a small bird. Within half an hour, the bird had siblings, and by the end of the 3rd hour, Kevin had a full zoo of origami animals politely waiting on the floor. The silence did not stop him, it challenged him, so he whistled, quietly, off-key, like someone trying to remember a song, but only recalling the part their uncle used to hum while fixing the sink. This did something unexpected. A hidden panel in the wall blinked, not opened, not slid, just blinked. Intrigued, Kevin stood, approached, and, being Kevin, knocked. The wall opened. Behind it, a hallway made entirely of discarded ideas. Half-formed philosophies floated past confused riddles. A blueprint labeled Plan B Maybe fluttered by like a rejected butterfly. It was beautiful in the way a thought can be just before it vanishes. And Kevin walked in. The elders, monitoring the chamber, screamed in at least 5 languages. He found the vault of conceptual overflow. That place is sealed. It was sealed. Who leaves a napkin artist unsupervised? Blithox slammed the emergency lever. The system responded by playing a flute solo and suggesting yoga. Tzulia, now oddly invested in Kevin's survival, or perhaps just morbidly curious, volunteered to retrieve him. She entered the vault with the gait of someone who once navigated an unstable treaty during a hailstorm and knew this would somehow be worse. Inside, she found Kevin talking to a philosophical diagram shaped like a moose. "It says it's contemplating sentience," Kevin explained, "but also that it likes toast." Tzulia stared. "You've bypassed the mute protocols." Kevin shrugged. "I didn't mean to. I was just folding animals." "And whistling, which is like talking, but more melodic and less argumentative." She exhaled. "You've disrupted containment. Again, not on purpose." She looked at the moose, then the paper zoo, then Kevin's face, still irritatingly cheerful despite being surrounded by the unspoken detritus of galactic thought. "You, human. Yes, you're not dangerous because you speak. I mean, I am loud sometimes. You're dangerous because you won't stop." Kevin grinned. Exactly. The council was unraveling. The chamber of neutral vibration had been compromised. The vault of conceptual overflow had been entered. The spoon chorus, still inexplicably present, had taken up residence in the eastern wing and were now unionizing. Elder Blithox paced in fractal circles. Elder Grox was whispering apologies to a lamp. Elder Nunquill had started writing a resignation letter addressed simply to whoever survives. Kevin Tramble, meanwhile, was enjoying a sandwich. No one knew where it came from. He certainly didn't. But there it was, layered with something that might have been turkey, might have been metaphor. He was humming again, this time a tune that made punctuation marks spontaneously rearrange themselves. Tzulia stood in front of him, arms crossed, eyebrows so furrowed they threatened to tunnel into her skull. "You're playing with the edge of reality." Kevin took a bite. "Tastes a bit like Tuesdays. Do you understand what you are? A bit peckish?" She glared. Kevin wiped his mouth. "Look, I'm not trying to destabilize anything, honestly. I'm just being myself, and apparently myself is a Category 5 narrative hazard." Tzulia sat down across from him. A long pause passed between them, thick, contemplative, slightly lemon-scented. "I think," she said carefully, "you're not meant to finish sentences." Kevin blinked. "Is this about the sock anecdote? Because that was going somewhere." "It's always going somewhere, that's the problem. The destination is never predictable." Kevin leaned forward. "But maybe unpredictability is what you need." Outside, a crack echoed across the sky. It wasn't thunder. It was the sound of expectation tearing. Something was changing. The council screens flickered, ancient fail-safes hiccuped. One elder began muttering the preamble to the rules charter, only to realize halfway through that the text had turned into limericks. "He's winding up," Blithox gasped. "You can feel it. He's getting ready to complete a thought." "No," Nunquill moaned. "We must stop him. Anything but that." Back in the vault, Kevin stood. "Listen," he said, "I've been trying to behave, honestly. But the more you shut me up, the more I bubble over. So here's the deal." Tzulia froze. "Don't. I'm going to say this, and I need you to let me finish. Please, don't." But Kevin was already committed. He raised his finger, took a breath, and said, "The thing about humans is—" A star blinked out. 2 planets switched places and didn't apologize. Every elder screamed. A fail-safe detonated in the shape of a question mark. Tzulia reached forward, desperate to interrupt, but tripped over a philosophical diagram that now identified as a chaise lounge. Kevin didn't stop. "We don't fit neatly into boxes. We smash them, paint them, stack them into forts, and then use them as metaphors for childhood trauma." The world staggered. Time shivered like it had just walked into a surprise party thrown by its enemies. And then, laughter. It started low, somewhere in the council's chamber. A reluctant chuckle from Nunquill. A snort from Grox. Even Blithock's stern as a tax audit cracked a grin, because what Kevin said wasn't dangerous or apocalyptic or even particularly clever. It was just true and absurd and exactly the kind of nonsense the galaxy hadn't heard in too long. Kevin looked around. Did I fix something? Tazulia brushed dust from her robe. You didn't fix anything. Oh, you just broke everything in the same direction. Character count, with spaces. 3,799. The aftermath was oddly quiet. Not peaceful, mind you. Peace implies order, and order had fled the building long ago, clutching its briefcase and yelling something about insurance premiums. No, this was the silence of a galaxy pausing to digest something it absolutely did not have the enzymes for. Kevin Tramble stood there mid-gesture, like a man who had just declared himself king of a land no one knew existed and wasn't entirely sure what to do next. The spoon chorus had gone into free verse. The vault of conceptual overflow began emitting jazz. Tazulia stared at Kevin, as if trying to decide whether to applaud or evacuate. You finished it, she said. Kevin looked around. I did. Huh, I wasn't even trying. Exactly, she muttered. That's what makes it worse. Back at the council chamber, Blithock slumped in his chair, eyes glazed, robe askew. His brain was doing what brains do when they've encountered something too absurd to process. It took a coffee break and left a sticky note that said, "Good luck." Grox was now feeding the philosophical moose. Nunquill had joined the Spoon Union out of spite. The rule, capital R, ancient, engraved in cosmic stone, was no longer enforced, not because they chose to abandon it, but because the universe simply stopped listening. Kevin had said what was never meant to be said, and nothing exploded. That more than anything broke them, because the rule was never about destruction. It was about fear. Fear that if a human ever got all the way to the period at the end of a sentence, something irreversibly unpredictable might happen. It did. The elders laughed. It wasn't dignified, it wasn't measured. It was the kind of laughter that snorts, hiccups, and echoes down the corridors of history like a drunk pigeon singing karaoke. And from that moment on, everything changed. Sort of. Not immediately. There were still protocols, still robes, still the odd emergency banana bread incinerator, but the rule was rewritten. It now read, "Let the human speak. Just don't try to make sense of it." Kevin, of course, had no idea any of this was historically significant. He was already wandering through a corridor shaped like a regret, looking for a bathroom. Tazulia caught up with him. "You're leaving?" "Well, I wasn't invited to stay." "You caused the single most unpredictable shift in galactic diplomatic dynamics since the incident with the ambiguous fork." "I do that. You should stay." Kevin looked at her, and for once didn't speak. He just smiled. And as he stepped onto the return shuttle, as the doors closed with a hiss that sounded suspiciously like the word "whoops," Tazulia turned back toward the vault, now glowing with a soft, ironic light. A message had been left on its surface. 7 words, etched in sandwich crust no less. "Sometimes you have to finish it."